The 2024 ZiPS projected National League standings are here, and there's one word that I would use to describe them: parity. And the Giants find themselves right in the middle of a league filled with parity, and that's part of why it's driving people in like me kind of insane that they don't just go out there and make aggressive moves with so many top free agents still remaining, even as we're 1 week from spring training, less than a week.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015. I've been podcasting with the Locked On Podcast Network for almost 5 years now, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you haven't already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started is by discussing, like I said, the National League projected standings according to ZiPS. Now, these, you're going to get more and more, like, since I've been doing this show, this has become more and more mainstream for, like, you know, the average baseball pundit or writer or whatever to talk about projections and projected standings. I think Pacoda always got like all the attention for whatever reason. Maybe they were, I don't know why, honestly, but you know, those come out. I don't find Pacoda, I don't know. I haven't run an analysis of who's the most accurate, but Pacoda is what it is, and they do projections. When people look at FanGraphs, you know, they do projections, but their projections are typically a combination of Steamer projections and ZiPS projections. And so today we had the release of the just pure ZiPS projections, which last year, those were much higher on the Giants than a lot of other projections. It turned out they were too high. Like, the Giants didn't perform up to those projections. And just for what it's worth, in the previous year, they exactly hit 81 wins, which was their preseason ZiPS projection. And so anyway, it's relevant to look at where do they stand now, especially with, I mean, I would say especially because there are so many players still out there. And what we see is a league of parity in the National League. And this was similar to what we saw with Pacoda. I didn't quite break it down in the same way, in that, like, the way I've broken it down here is looking at it. I tweeted this, but like from 95, which is the top median projection, and it goes to the Braves, 95 wins, all the way down to 66, which is where we find the Nationals, and 67, the Rockies. There's like very few teams in between. You've got the Dodgers kind of a little bit below the Braves, 93 win median projection. You've got the Pirates at 75, but those teams are like on an island. I implore you to go to my Twitter and look at the visual to kind of see it represented. And then you've got 10 teams bunched together between 79 and 85 wins. There's a 6-win, spread where you find 2/3 of the National League. And the Giants are right in the middle of that, at like literally right in the middle. Actually, I think they're more towards the top than the bottom, but their projection is 82 wins. Okay. And this is a median projection. So they run, whatever it is, a 10,000, 100,000, a million simulations of the season with, basically that's what they do. And then this is like the middle one for what they ended up with. And so half of the time, the way median works, they were above 82, and half of the time they were below it in these simulations. And so 82 just is the middle number. So it's not necessarily saying they will end up with, that's not how projections really work, is saying they will end up with 82 wins. It's saying that in half of the projections that we ran, they were above 82, and in half of the scenarios, they were below. And so you just hope you're living in the world of they're above. Like last year, they were below. And it's pretty normal for like error bars are enormous in baseball. And so if you're at an 82 win median projection, it's very kind of normal to end up either, you could win 92, or you could lose or win 72. And so, or anything in between, obviously. So anyway, 82 wins, like, it's not great, but it's also not terrible. And that's like, it could be the catchphrase of the San Francisco Giants for the last few years. It's like, not terrible, but not great either. And perfectly mediocre. And that's not good enough. This is not a fan base that's in a mood to tolerate another mediocre season. Okay. And that's why, and look, they have their own internal projections and they could view themselves higher than this. I don't know. But, according to these projections, I feel like this happens a lot because I talk about them every year. The Giants are projected to be that first team that doesn't make the playoffs. Like, every team ahead of them does. No one below them. What am I saying? Like, you get what I'm saying? They're projected to be like the 7th team out of 6 playoff teams, right? And they're the one by 1 win. They projected to miss the playoffs by 1 win. And so each win that they can pick up is extremely huge here, especially because, like, you've got the Dodgers and the Braves at the top in the 90s, and then the next best projection goes to the Phillies at 85. And so if you can put yourself in, like, put yourself in that mix where you're more like 85, 86, then your playoff odds are gonna go up a lot. And again, this isn't suggesting that 85 wins will be all it takes to be the top wildcard team. This is a median projection for every team, and a lot of teams are going to beat half the time. Each team is going to beat this median projection is what the suggestion is there. So anyway, what I see is parity. What I see is a free agent class that remains deep. Maybe not deep in the sense of there's a ton of top talent, but there's a ton of players out there, and there's 4 guys who I would consider quote unquote top talents, at least in this class, and very arguably $100 million plus players. It remains to be seen if they'll get that. And the fact that we're less than a week away from most teams reporting to spring training, the Dodgers and Padres reporting early this year because they start the season about a week early in South Korea. But yeah, Wednesday is report date for pitchers and catchers for the Giants. And so anyway, you go out there and you get, a Blake Snell or a Cody Bellinger or a Matt Chapman, trade for a Willy Adames or a Ha-Sung Kim or whatever it is, and put yourself in that category. And I'm not saying they won't do it. I'm just saying they should do it. That's what I see when I look at these projections. So anyway, we're going to switch gears momentarily and get into a very interesting top 100 prospects list. It's by ESPN. I really respect the heck out of Kiley McDaniel, who does this list. He is like a scout, and he's just kind of my guy when it comes to scouting and lists like this. So we'll get into what he has to say, what Giants are on this list, and what does he have to say about them momentarily. And before we do, Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Ibotta. The new year, for so many people, means resolutions to save money. I know for me, I enjoy it. I'm a freak. I'm a numbers guy. And for some reason, I enjoy crunching numbers and budgeting and stuff like that. And saving money where you can is huge. So stop shopping without getting anything in return. Start getting cash back on every purchase you make with Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $145 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, buy that flight that you've been eyeing, the game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. All right, as promised, we're going to switch gears from the ZiPS projection thing and get into essentially Kiley McDaniel's top. I think it was such a good hire when they brought in Kiley McDaniel to be their lead prospect analyst, essentially, because before that, I've used this term a lot recently for some reason, but certain publications were just kind of a clown show when it came to prospect rankings, or I'm sorry to say it, but did you see the Athletics offseason grades list? I didn't click the link, to be fair, because I didn't want to, because they gave the Giants a D. I have said, you can't, I get it, you got to make content, but with so many players still remaining, you got to at least preface it by saying grade so far. And a D for all that they've done. I think they've improved their team quite a bit. I don't think that they're, A+, but I think it's at least a passing grade with the addition of Jung-Hoo Lee. The signing of Jordan Hicks is really intriguing. And you look at some of the teams above them, like the Washington Nationals, and I was like, what? I looked at what have they done? Zero major league free agent signings. Zero. And so, how do they get a better grade than the Giants? It's because you're expecting more from the Giants, and I get that. But come on. So I digress here. We're talking about top 100 prospects lists. Anyway, I just think Kiley McDaniel, when he does his contract predictions at ESPN, his prospect rankings and all that, it's worth checking out, and I'm happy to cover it. And it's not just fishing for content. Locked On, by the way, has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. All right, so getting to Kiley McDaniel's list, it differs. I was discussing this yesterday about kind of why it was especially interesting. Not only did I all that stuff about how I really like Kiley McDaniel, but his list differs pretty dramatically from whatever the last one we looked at was. I think it was Keith Law, and his top 100. We've done MLB.com. It's always just interesting. And keep in mind, I say this every year, but Logan Webb never appeared on anybody's top 100. Patrick Bailey got completely slept on as a prospect. Some publications had him somewhere, but I didn't see a lot of this guy's going to be the best defender in baseball. I don't know. It's just these aren't the most accurate. It's not the most accurate exercise. But both Keith Law and even MLB.com, I believe, were much lower. They had dropped Marco Luciano quite a bit. And what's so interesting is to see Marco Luciano still coming in at number 26 for Kiley McDaniel. And actually, I'm surprised to see that Marco Luciano comes in above even Kyle Harrison. And so that's unusual. Like Heath Law had Harrison at number 11, best left-handed pitching prospect in baseball, etc. But number 26 is the first Giant here on McDaniel's list, and that's Marco Luciano. And he says the type of player Luciano is, quote, probably not a shortstop, but has plus power, patience, and bat speed. So I appreciate that he mentions the patience because that's what I saw, and also probably not a shortstop is not like what we usually read, which is like definitely not a shortstop. Because what I saw, I've said this, but I don't watch a lot of minor league baseball. And so I'm just kind of going off scouting reports before these guys show up. And then once they show up, I feel like I can scout them. It's kind of, I know how to watch a player and see what I see and have an evaluation. But until then, it's like you kind of got to rely on the reports. But I also saw a lot of patience. Like Marco Luciano exhibited, just like Luis Matos, we saw improvements from Casey Schmidt in this regard. We knock on the Giants' player development, but they have been able to kind of develop patience with some of their aggressive free-swinging players and young players like Luciano and Matos. I mean, Matos is like still 21, 22, and Luciano's down there too. So anyway, the little blurb says, like many players in this range on the list, Luciano was a top player in his international class, signing for $2.6 million in the 2018 class due to his electric bat speed. Luciano has consistently played shortstop in the minors, including in his 2023 big league debut. And he's improved enough now that scouts say he's playable there with being a strong third baseman as a backup plan. So timeout. That's what I saw. And you go back and play the tape from when we were reading Keith Law or whoever it was, not to, if it wasn't Keith Law, I apologize to him personally for saying it was him. But those who are still saying like he's just absolutely unequivocally not a shortstop, what I saw in the brief time he was in the major leagues was a guy who looked capable there and made the plays, had the arm, and looked like, I based on scouting reports, I expected to see, oh yeah, for sure, this guy's not a shortstop, but he didn't look that way in his brief time in the major leagues. So hearing, and that's again, McDaniel being plugged in, and he says, scouts say he's improved enough now that he's playable there with being a strong third baseman as a backup plan. So that's why he's up on this list. Okay. And then at the plate, McDaniel continues, Luciano can be whiff prone due to in-zone swing and miss and relying on his bat speed more than his below average bat control, but has a good sense of the strike zone and 30 plus homer upside. He's a good big leaguer of some sort. He's a good big leaguer of some sort with outcomes ranging from a boom or bust third baseman with a bunch of strikeouts or a legitimate star shortstop hitting 30 homers a year. Okay, so that gets me fired up right there, especially because Luciano reached the major leagues. And so he figures to perhaps, get a full season of a look. And, all the talk about, they need a backup plan. Like if he struggles and they need to send him down, they need to have somebody else they can play there. That's the kind of discussion about, the Giants need another shortstop. It's not necessarily they need someone like to replace him. It's that, and I said, like, if you go get Willy Adames, slide Luciano over to third and have him compete there with Casey Schmidt, and just kind of may the best player win. If Luciano just clearly exhibits that he's like a better hitter, because Schmidt really struggled in that regard, as many young players do, and he's like really good there. I don't know. I don't know. So I still think that would work, but hearing that he still is believed by some to be a potential legitimate star shortstop who has 30 homer potential gets me fired up, because we've been waiting forever for Luciano to show up in the majors, and he's here. And so is Kyle Harrison, who's the next Giants player to show up on this list, and he comes in at number 36. And so both MLB and Keith Law had Harrison much higher. And what Kiley McDaniel says is the type of player Harrison is a lower slot lefty starter that flashes 3+ pitches, but command can hold him back at times. And the little blurb again, Harrison is yet another high school player from the 2020 draft class who didn't get a full spring to prove himself to most scouts, but the Giants had figured out how good he was without the extra time. They gave Harrison $2.5 million in the third round, when many teams just thought Harrison wanted too much money for his solid average stuff and feel from a low slot. Almost immediately after signing, Harrison's velocity spiked, going from 88 to 92 on the summer showcase circuit in 2019 to 93 to 95, and that has held for basically his entire pro career. This helps his off-speed stuff play up to where all 3 pitches are 55 or 60 grade offerings on the 20 to 80 scouting scale. His command has lagged a bit behind, though, spiking to 6.6 walks per 9 in AAA last year, but those numbers improved in the big leagues when he walked 2.9 batters per 9 innings over 34 2/3 innings. Kiley McDaniel says, I'd expect Harrison to throw 100 to 150 innings with intermittent moments of brilliance in 2024, but there's a shot he comes out of the gates hot and mounts a Rookie of the Year campaign as the Giants' second best starter behind Logan Webb. So once again, we're talking about a player viewed here by Kiley McDaniel, at least. I mean, even in his bad case scenario, moments of brilliance, and then or he comes out of the gates hot and has a Rookie of the Year campaign. I mean, come on. How does that not get you fired up? And so, you know, your top 2 guys in Luciano and Harrison, kind of consensus there. Patrick Bailey, by the way, and Luis Matos graduated, so they're not eligible to be on these lists. They're not rookies anymore. But otherwise, and so when you see like farm system rankings and stuff, keep that in mind, that you lost 2 of your better prospects to graduation. You know, they're not counted anymore. And so that's part of the deal when you're talking about farm system rankings. And also, people were wrong about Patrick Bailey. Nobody had him high enough, is what it seems. So, but I think we all see the raw talent of Kyle Harrison for sure. And so coming up in just a minute, we'll finish up with the Giants on this list and also talk about just dingers, what's a word that starts with D that speaks to all the swings and misses that JD Davis had last year. But he won his arbitration hearing. And so we're going to kind of rant about the fact that they went to arbitration in the first place later on. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Those who celebrate, those who have their hearts in their throat. I don't know, what's the term? Like people who are nervous because the 49ers are in the Super Bowl and it's in a couple of days. Yeah, that's me. But happy Super Bowl. If you're like me, a normal non-Niners Super Bowl is just all about having a good time, getting the best seats, best snacks, placing some super bets though. That's kind of regardless of if the Niners are in it or not. And the fact that they are can spice up the big game in a number of different ways. The money line favoring the 49ers right now on FanDuel at -130. Point spread has remained consistent at -2.5 for the 49ers to cover. Over-under has remained consistent at 47.5 total points scored. So not only can you bet on who's going to win Super Bowl 58, but you can also bet on things like which players will score a touchdown. Hello, Christian McCaffrey. and how many points will be scored, like I said, and so much more. New customers join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, as promised, we're going to just continue to run through this list and also just rant a little bit about the Giants going to arbitration with JD Davis, and also talk about how they lost their hearing. So, was it worth it, Giants? Was it worth it, all that effort to disparage your own player only to lose? I guess so. I mean, the Giants are not the only team that does this, but it's not a good look. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, I was about to say tomorrow. I'm very disoriented. Those of you who follow me on Twitter know that I had a super weird sleep day, and I woke up in the middle of the afternoon, late afternoon, when it was dark, thinking it was the next morning. So we're not doing an episode tomorrow unless there's an emergency, like they signed someone. But on Monday, it'll be the week of spring training. So we're going to have tons of content for you. Hopefully stuff happens. We've also got mailbag questions galore. Always a ton to talk about on the show. And that'll be coming up next week, as pitchers and catchers are going to report on Wednesday. And then we're going to get tons of juicy content out of that. But continuing on with the list, number 66 on the top 100 per Kiley McDaniel is left-handed pitcher Carson Whisenhunt. And so it's just nice to see some of these guys getting some recognition and showing up on these lists. He says, type, knockout changeup, solid fastball, curveball, but command needs to get a notch better. The blurb, Whisenhunt was a solid second-round prospect as a sophomore at East Carolina, getting national attention for an outing against Vanderbilt in a 2021 Super Regional where the main event was Kumar Rocker versus Gavin Williams. There was buzz circulating during Whisenhunt's draft spring that he was sitting in the mid-90s in preseason starts, and he leapt to the top of my he led to the top of my follow list before the bad news was announced. He was suspended for the season due to a positive PED test that Whisenhunt said came from a national nutrition store chain. He made a few appearances on the Cape before the draft and went 66th overall. This is what I'm saying. Kiley McDaniel knows his stuff, right? Like, that's detailed kind of in-depth analysis that you don't necessarily need to know. I mean, the PED stuff is relevant, but he continues, the question was whether Whisenhunt's fastball velo was truly the mid-90s that he showed in preseason starts, or 90 to 93 that he showed as a sophomore. He went to the Arizona Fall League after signing and was in the low 90s as he built back up. And then in the 2023 regular season, he did sit 92 to 95, basically between the two levels. His plus changeup is the one constant, while his curveball gets better with the added arm speed, playing solid average right now. The big things Whisenhunt must do to rise from here are prove that he's healthy after ending the season with an elbow sprain. It sounds like he is what McDaniel says. And sure enough, he's a non-roster invitee to spring, and I've heard that they expect he's ready to go. But elbow sprains are scary. And improve his fastball command so he can make his changeup even more effective when working ahead in counts. So anyway, there you go. Just another solid kind of pickup for the Giants in recent drafts. There's been a lot said about they've definitely had some failures with their first round picks. Although next on the list, we find their most recent first round pick this is 3 for 3 on the list that I've looked at, top 100, where Bryce Eldridge is appearing already right out of high school on top 100 lists. And at 96 is Eldridge, and the type is a 6'7" first baseman with 70 grade power and a surprising amount of hitability. So this is kind of consensus now. Like everybody is kind of in agreement on what type of hitter Eldridge is at 6'7" with the power, but surprising hit ability, like ability to hit for average, not swing and miss, not boom or bust. And so the blurb is that Eldridge stood out to me as one of two underclassmen on the Carolinas/Virginia team at the East Coast Pro Showcase in summer 2021. The event featured 2022 first-round picks like Termar Johnson, Drew Jones, Cam Collier, but the Carolinas team had three underclassmen who batted lefty, and I would set up down the third base side just to watch them, even though I didn't need to have an opinion on them for 2 years. Those two hitters were Walker Jenkins, 5th overall pick in the 2023 draft, 13th on this list, and Eldridge, 16th overall pick. Ryan Clifford, blah, 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 doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what he's talking about there. But he says, at this event, Eldridge, a 6'7", 16-year-old who I didn't previously know much about, hit a number of balls over 100 miles an hour and then pitched in relief, hitting the mid-90s, mixing in an above average to plus breaking ball. He kept doing stuff like that throughout the next summer, and in the spring, he hit a huge bomb when I went to see him and Jenkins on back-to-back days. For someone with such long arms, Eldridge has a unique ability to keep his arms flexed and get around to that inside fastball. So he has a rare scouting report for someone that tall. 70 grade power and at least a 45 grade bat. After signing, he hit 6 homers, drew 20 walks in 31 pro games. He's limited to first base due to his size, although the Giants played him in the outfield. So I don't know what that means exactly. Projecting, perhaps. And speed, due to his size and speed. But here's another rare quality. If hitting doesn't work out, he was a second-round caliber prospect on the mound with an above-average fastball-slider combo and pretty solid command. He might never get on a mound in pro ball, but it helps me feel better about the inherent risk of a long-levered high school first baseman, knowing it would be an option. So again, the Giants have been using him in the outfield. They used him in the outfield in his pro debut, not at first base. But a lot of people believe he's better as a hitter and that first base is more of his position. But again, people have always said Luciano needs to move off of short, and he hasn't. So anyway, we actually don't really have time to get into J.D. Davis beating the Giants in arbitration. All you need to know is they went to arbitration. I think arbitration is dumb, and they were bickering over $325,000. You put in all this time and effort to build a case against your own player, make that case in front of a panel, and say this is why he's worth $300,000 less. And J.D. Davis says, this is why I'm not. This is why I'm worth $6.9 million. And the panel picks one number or the other that the team and the player submitted, and they picked J.D. Davis's $6.9 million instead of the Giants' $6.55. So dumb. But again, the Giants are not the only team that does this. It's like commonplace in the game. It was the old regime that just like never went to arbitration. But this is only the second time in the Farhan Zaidi era that they've actually gone to arbitration. So congrats, J.D. Davis. You've got a $6.9 million salary in your final year of arbitration eligibility before reaching free agency. That is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thanks in advance. Thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. Go Niners. My goodness. Go Niners. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.